Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Fawn Pod. It's friends occasionally not disagreeing. It's the podcast that believes you when you say you saw drones flying over your house last night. I'm Brett here tonight with Justin and Cody, here to talk about a new series recently released on Amazon Prime Video. Before we get to that, Justin, what have you been up to lately?
Trying to finish up Christmas shopping mainly, in between like all the extra crap going on at work. So, it's been a hectic and interesting week, but knock on wood, I think at this point I've got everything done. I've got packages mailed out to, where they need to go for people who aren't local. Uh, and that's really kind of been my life aside from you know, I had a couple of different role-playing games. Actually, no, just one this weekend. I was thinking kind of back a week prior to about the other one. But yeah, I had another episode or not another episode, another session of our Savage Worlds game, which is in the sci-fi rules for that. It's kind of a very open system. You can tailor it to whatever you want, and that's it's getting very interesting. Some I guess you could say like elements of Dead Space are starting to kind of work their way into the narrative for what the game master has been running. So it's getting hairy and very entertaining, and a nice end to, like I said, a pretty hectic week. So not a whole lot else from me aside from the thing I mentioned last week that I don't want to talk about until the Fondies. But Cody, what about you?
I just have been doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to be honest, but I'll just mention a couple things. I did a little substitute late birthday day with the family yesterday. We played Ticket to Ride and what did we play for the first game yesterday? Oh, Wingspan. So two pretty solid games. Everybody enjoyed those. We had a lot of fun there. And then finished our evening with Knives Out, which both my kids actually really did enjoy. I think my daughter may have fell asleep at one point, but she says she didn't. But I think she might have. But it was as good. What was this, a third, maybe third or fourth time I've seen it, and it was just as good. So I haven't watched Glass Onion since that came out, but maybe we will get to that sometime with the kids as well if they enjoy that. Um, and then I guess other than that, I've been doing a little Tears of the Kingdom and some other things on the side, but I will put a plug in for I started watching what was a pretty, as I understand it at least, critically lauded show on Stars, but it is on Netflix now, so I was able to check it out because I don't have Stars, but it's kind of a wrestling drama called Heels, and has Stephen Amell, I think, is the main guy who I think was he Arrow back in the day? Is that who that was? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's basically like this little rinky-dink promotion in, I forget, Texas or someplace in the South. And it's kind of like the story of they do have matches on the show, not like full matches, but just as part of the story that's going on. But it's a lot of life inside the ring, life outside the ring, family matters, like how running and spending all your time on promoting your own wrestling federation like strains your family and other relationships as well. So it's been pretty good through, I think, 4 or 5 episodes I've watched so far of that. So that's been pretty good. So, Brett, how about you? What have you been up to?
Uh, the last week or so, I've been spending a fair amount of time trying to get Christmas decorations up both inside and outside the house. Trying to get in that season. And uh we got lucky because the weather's been pretty awful lately, the last week or so. But I did find a couple of days where it was nice enough I could go outside and do some of those outdoor decorations. But I probably still have some more stuff I'm probably gonna end up getting up out there at some point here. But um the other thing that happened recently is we have basically adopted a spider who was already within our home. Um, we we looked up the one day, oh, there's a spider on the ceiling. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll go take care of that. And I caught it, and like rather than just smashing it, I caught it in a cup. And then I my wife looked at it and said, "Oh my gosh, that's really cute. We should keep that." And so we now have a little spider in a small terrarium that we bought. Um, and it our best. It's definitely a jump a form of a jumping spider. We think it's a bold jumping spider by the search results we've done, but um, yeah, he's named Gary. The kids picked that name. I couldn't tell you as to why, but little Spider Gary seems pretty happy in his little bird skull that he has for home now, and
Oh, Jesus. What the hell
Sure,
are
it's
you
not
into in this
Halloween instead
house?
of instead of Christmas over at your place.
um, he has not as yet eaten anything that we've seen. But it also seems like he may be into like a molting phase or something based on the little nest kind of thing that he's building. So we'll see where this adventure goes. But so far it's been interesting at the very least. So
Sounds like a recurring segment we're about to have on the show.
yes,
The
The
next
Gary
little
week,
Minute.
Gary cam in the
Gary
corner.
and his 100 babies.
Yeah, right?
All right, let's get into the topic here tonight. We are looking at kind of an initial look at a show that recently released on Prime Video called Secret Level, which this description here directly from Prime Video is that Secret Level is an adult animated anthology series featuring original stories set within the worlds of some of the world's most beloved video games. This comes from the creative minds behind Love, Death, and Robots, which is a series that I've mentioned just recently as one I love. Each of the 15 episodes is a celebration of games and gamers. And this was one I forget now when exactly I saw the preview for it. It was during one of the game, not game awards, but like one of the shows where they're show upcoming games and things like that.
Future game show or something.
Yeah, it was on there one of those. And right away I thought it looked really cool. I like the art style of what they're presenting, and just the idea behind it seemed really really intriguing to me. Because like just the fact a lot of games, and as we'll come to talk about here on these episodes in specifically, but a lot of games don't necessarily tell stories like what we're being presented with here. They might have a lot of backstory and lore within the game, and they might have a lot of like really cool flashy cutscenes, but you don't really, unless it's like something that's very story driven. There's a lot of stories that theoretically are happening as you're playing the game, but you don't see them. And it's essentially, this series is kind of bringing those stories to life, which I find to be a really cool idea. And yeah, I we'll get to talking here very shortly about specific episodes and how well they worked. But any thoughts you guys had on just this series in general?
Like you, I had also watched and enjoyed Love, Death, and Robots. So when I saw they were starting a new project and that project was all about video games and D&D, we'll get to that. But when I saw that was their focus, I'm like, okay, this is almost tailor-made for me, it feels like. And so, yeah, I was really excited as soon as I heard about the announcement of this, because they put out really interesting stuff, this team. And yeah, so I was on board as soon as I knew it was a thing.
What is this show about? I saw the preview for this show, but I was intrigued, I guess mostly because I don't know the games that are being featured in this show. So that was intriguing to me to check out. Mixed with, I was hoping some of the people that were hosting this episode when we got to it would have had played some of those games, because I'm intrigued to see like how you took some of the stuff compared to how it hit me a little bit here and there. So yeah. It's an interesting concept, I will say, to like have an anthology series with tiny snippets of all these little shows that based on a video game.
Yeah. So I guess let's just get into the each specific episode. We're gonna do 4 episodes tonight. There are currently, as time of recording this, we have 8 available. This next 7 I think are dropping this next week, but I didn't actually go and look at what day those come out. But sometime soon. But we're gonna do 4 episodes today. Just gonna give you an intro into this series, and then we'll come back around and do the full series at a later date here sometime soon. But episode number 1 is, I guess, titled. The way they have it is essentially they tell you the game, and then like there's a title of the episode. That's probably like the true title of it. But The Queen's Cradle is the title of this one, and it's based off of Dungeons and Dragons. And in this case, I did find it interesting that they started off with a game that started as a board game, and I kind of assumed there was all going to be video games. Well, but I mean, D&D does have video game adaptations, so I guess it is in the video game realm now at this point. But the fact that they started with a a game that started as a board game caught me a little bit off guard. But I believe is this year the 50th anniversary of D&D as well?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that was another reason to include this in here. Though I think Justin, you kind of alluded to the fact that D&D is a very like story driven game, and so that really makes a lot of sense for this to be included because there's so many possible stories to tell with that game. But this particular episode that they gave to us features a young man named Solon who is being held prisoner by the Cult of the Dragon, like a group of them that are out in the wilderness apparently. But
Hail Khaleesi.
Not that dragon.
Oh.
But we have a group of heroes who are very kind of stereotypical to a Dungeons and Dragons party. We have and I didn't write this down, but is the usual kind of rogue crew. You've got a warrior,
sorcerer,
and a sorcerer, and and they're all different races as well. But I found this episode to be really cool, a really good way to start off the series. It was the main thing that I took away from this was this episode is like somewhere around 15 minutes, and they all are very reasonably short, like under 20 minutes. And what really caught me was their ability to make a 15-minute episode that pulled me in enough to, by the end of the episode, I was like fully invested in these characters and their story. I found it was like really, like I say, just pulled me in. I was like really rooting for these characters by the end. Any thoughts you guys had in this episode?
I do agree that it's weird that they built this as a show all about video games, and then they start with something that, sure, it's video game adjacent, but it primarily started as a game in a different format. It's like saying we're going to have this show that's all about like slasher killers, and then have the first episode be, featuring John Carpenter's The Thing or something. It's just it's cool, but it doesn't necessarily fit. That said, I enjoyed this one quite a bit as well, just because I have such a history with tabletop RPGs and D&D in particular. And just really out of the park visuals. And for just a 15-minute snippet of story, I agree. It really did do a good job of framing the world, the conflict, and it ended on just what felt like a perfect spot. That could it felt like the end of a session of the game if you were sitting down with friends, like all right, you've gotten to the spot where things seem like they're going to be resolved, but wait, there's a twist, and we'll meet again next time. It really felt like it encapsulated that feel, and I really enjoyed that.
I thought the visuals for this first episode, really the whole series, but this one in particular, just to kind of get me into the show, drew me in right away. The main 4 or 5 characters that were on the party, I thought really they were animated, very lifelike. They looked very expressive and like who they would be as characters if you were like, as you both said, kind of playing through the overall campaign. And you are right. Like the little story they tell here in the 10, 15 minutes is compelling. It's enough to get you interested into the world, what happened beforehand, and make you kind of question what's going to happen afterwards as well. I like that they started off with Dungeons and Dragons as the first one, only because if you're going to have this be one of the row of the episodes you have here, like this is a really easy one for somebody who's not a gamer to easily kind of picture like the fantasy genre. And like these are archetypes that we kind of know. You can jump into this one pretty easy without having to even have played any Dungeons and Dragons, period. I mean, to be able to understand what's going on here, I feel like. Um, when the episode ended and we didn't find out what happened, I was like, wait, what? I guess you're gonna cut it there, and that was a bit of a problem for me. I'm not gonna lie. So
Okay. Looking for some closure there.
something.
I mean,
Um,
that is fair.
yeah, I guess it depends. Yeah, how you come across looking at these episodes and what you're expecting from them certainly could change your your outlook on them at the end. Uh, I did feel like like it ended on such a like a high strong point. It for me that worked really well because it got me like really excited. I think for the next episode even. Like I was like, oh wow, this is like, this is really cool. Let's get the next one going here. Um, and obviously, if it's pretty hard to tell a story that comes to a full closing point, within that time frame. So I don't know that they would have been able to try to do that, but I can see how you're thinking, without it actually ending, it feels incomplete because it is really.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Even compared to like the other three that we're gonna talk about tonight, though, this one's like really like I don't know, seems extra cliffhangery for no necessary reason. Like they could have
That's
given
a
us
fair
that
point.
final fight, and what would it have hurt? You know what I mean? Like we're not going back to this. That's kind of my worry is that like this is a one and done. So like show us what happens in the fight then. Like give us the fight.
Mm.
Yeah, it probably would have been like 5 more minutes of animation, in all honesty, and that's all it would have taken, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, from my perspective, coming as someone who's run games and played in games in that format a lot, I feel like they were trying to go for that. Come back next time and see. And in a meta narrative kind of way, sometimes that next time never comes. Sometimes gaming groups fall apart or someone moves away, and you never get the closure to that story. So, like I said, a very meta sort of way. I think that ending really works well in terms of addressing what D&D is and what it sometimes ends up being. Um, but maybe I'm being a little too generous,
This is all because
especially.
we didn't take the battery covers off on the back of your RPG we played with you, isn't it? Is that what this is? You're still mad about that? Okay.
I mean, you were so close to seeing the Cyrillic letters, but well, that's the way these things go. uh,
That point you made though just does bring up something that I meant to mention at the beginning and forgot to, but um I did investigate how like what was their process of selecting these games and like how they went about writing creating these episodes. And it seems like they really went quite far in depth into getting it right. So it seems like they went for a really like a kind of a diverse range of games, like genres and like popular titles. And apparently they really work closely with the developers and kind of to identify like interesting characters and storylines within that franchise to focus on, including as I understand, like getting information from the developers on like what to stay away from also. Like so don't go in this direction because that's not what we're about, kind of thing. And so it seems like they really went out of their way to make it feel like you're actually in that game, rather than just, oh, here we're going to make a story and use your IP as a a surface coating here. So yeah, I think you probably are onto something there, that they meant it to feel like a small segment of the larger story.
yeah,
So yeah, I really enjoy these characters in this one. It it did feel like they all were kind of unique and had their own like strengths and weaknesses as well, which is exactly how they would be, in the game. So, um, I we didn't talk about this before we started, but I'm guessing we're not going to try and like rate each of these episodes individually. I don't think we need to go
Um,
that far into it unless you guys want to.
I didn't, but if you need me to, I can.
Okay. No, I
yeah,
didn't. I didn't
I'm
either.
I'm fine skipping it if there's no ratings because I mean I could
Yeah.
pull a number up out of the air, but yeah, I'm fine with just kind of giving impressions and then like in a couple of weeks or whatever, rating the show as a whole.
Yeah.
Once we've
I like that
yeah
idea. Yeah,
yeah
that sounds good. So,
okay.
uh, on to episode two, titled "It Takes a Life," and this is based on the game Sifu, which is one that I have not played myself, though I did watch enough of the gameplay like early on when it came out to like understand what the game is about. Um, and for those of you who are not as familiar with Sifu as you are with Dungeons and Dragons, because that's been around forever, it's essentially it's a martial arts based game, um, and a very like difficult, kind of demanding game. Kind of along the lines of like a Souls like kind of thing, where making mistakes get punished heavily for it. Um, and this game has a really cool, unique as far as I'm aware, mechanic where when you die in the game, your character actually ages some number of years, and so you revive, but you're older. And even goes as far, if I remember correctly, like the older your character gets, like the you have to play differently because your character cannot do things the way they did when they were younger, essentially.
Hmm.
So, really cool game mechanic, and we do see it here prominently in this episode. Um, I really enjoyed just the episode was very flashy with just lots of fast paced martial arts going on, um, and a somewhat generic backstory of, and this comes straight from the game itself too, but the story of a young child watching his father get murdered and then seeking revenge on that. It's basically a gang, I think. Um, but I really enjoyed this one as well. I thought it was just visually very cool, and even this one like managed to have some heart at the end. Like it it wasn't
Hmm.
just this action episode. It like actually had a message behind it. So what do you guys think?
Um, yeah, I was only passingly familiar with Sifu before I watched this episode. I mean, I knew there was the aging mechanic, and I knew it was like a kung fu sort of revenge story. That's pretty much all I knew about it. It actually had kind of fallen off my radar, and I forgot it was even a thing until this episode came up, and I'm like, I recognize that name. Um, but yeah, we don't really get any explanation for why the character is able to get back up in exchange for a few years of his life or anything other than he's got this little charm dangling from his belt.
Yeah, that's true. They don't
Um,
explain it in the episode, though it is explained in the game, as far as I'm
oh, okay.
aware.
I was hoping so. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, okay, you take that and run with it because the action is really what carries you along for most of this. And holy crap, this is well choreographed. I mean, just some of the camera angles, like in the hallway fight, because it like goes underneath them, and you can see like it's a glass floor, so you can like see their footwork and stuff as people are getting like thrown, over shoulders and having their faces caved in and stuff. Um, yeah, this was just it had that feel of like an old kung fu flick, but with a more serious tone than a lot of those had. And yeah, it's just really, really flashy. And it did bring it back to a more grounded level at the end.
Hmm.
And left off on a somber note, like you said. And I think that really elevated it over just kind of a forgettable, flashy little segment.
Yeah, I didn't know what the hell was going on in this game. I've never played Sifu. Don't know what this is. I picked up on the mechanic of the charm things breaking. I thought that was interesting. It was kind of cool. I didn't know what was going on, like if you could replenish those or if they were limited or what the story was. good animation in this one again, I must say. Almost not quite, but pretty close to more like a just looking at a couple stills from the episode here. Almost looks more like a arcane style shading, or almost like maybe one of Justin's Double Dragon, Dragon Kid Cola type art styles giving me here a little bit with some of the Far East type imagery that's going on here and people fighting. But it was cool, the fighting, at least I will say that. I enjoyed the part at the counter with the lady and her, would she have dumplings? Is that what she kept serving him?
I think so.
Yes.
And that was kind of a cool moment at the end, I thought there as well. But in general, I didn't see the boss fight. I didn't know what was going on in this episode or what the revenge story was. And yeah.
Okay. Does bring me I there's a question I was going to ask, and I'll still ask at the end, but that is definitely I think a concern with this series.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did really enjoy it, but the fact that I understood the game to some degree probably had a factor in that. So especially based on what Cody's saying here. Episode 3, titled "The Once and Future King." This game is about the game New World. And I think it specifically, well, obviously specifically about the I think it's a new like a DLC or whatever, but it's New World Aeternum is the official title of the game this is based on. And we get what is our first but not our last like cameo VA in this episode, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger himself playing the main character, which I I had to look it up because at first I was like, wait, is this just somebody pretending to be Schwarzenegger or is it actually him? Because like I felt like he didn't sound as old as I was expecting it to sound, honestly.
That's fair.
But this the game New World is essentially it was an MMORPG, so it's this online game where you playing with hundreds of thousands of other players in a world, and has a lot of RPG elements to it, has a lot of like adventuring things, and as far as I know it has like some survival type things as well, where you're like gathering resources so you can build things along the way. But very kind of they take this episode and I would really say it's more of a almost more of a comedy episode than anything else. They did really play up on the idea of like respawning in games, like just coming back to life after you die, and they really just kind of took that and ran with it. But what do you guys think?
I probably knew even less about New World than I did about Sifu going into this episode. I knew it was an MMO, and it should be mentioned it was Amazon's attempt at breaking into like
Right.
MMO gaming. So I guarantee that's why it's an episode included in a show on Amazon.
I had that feeling as well.
But yeah, so I still don't really know what the game itself is about, but just seeing this complete and utter loser with such an overestimation of his own abilities just keep getting up and trying to challenge the king of this island to for his throne in like a multitude of different ways, and continually getting his ass handed to him. Yeah, it was more fun than I expected it to be. And they tried to work in a message at the end about like changing your ways and maybe moving forward with your life instead of being stuck in the same, kind of ruts.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure how effective it necessarily was, especially, given the reality of the world around us and, how infrequently that seems to happen. But at least they tried to make it more than just like a silly little farce at the end. So I enjoyed this one a lot more than I expected to.
Yeah. So, well, we originally talked about doing 2 episodes, and after those first 2, I was like, I don't know about this show. But this third one for me helped it quite a bit. I mean, as an experience for the series. And I guess by that I mean the first one didn't tell a complete tale. The second one I had no idea what the hell was going on, and I felt like that mattered. And this one told an actual complete story. I don't know what this game is. I have no idea what the game is, but I was introduced to some characters, put in a situation. They kind of explained the rules of the world to us as they were there. Like, you can't die on this island. I'm from this place. I'm here to conquest. Yeah, yeah. And then it was a highly entertaining episode. I will say, when it first started with Schwarzenegger, I was like, oh, this is going to not be good. Like, that actually had me really worried that they had him doing the voice for this episode. And he grew on me as this episode went on. And I do like that there was like kind of a self-contained, whatever, 15 or 20-minute plot here where, he ramps up his effort to try to beat the king of this island. He can't do it. And then he, as Justin said, kind of overcomes and apparently is able to make a crown-sized piece of metal big enough and to make a prosthetic arm-sized piece of metal, which is a whole different type of thing. But I enjoyed this one actually quite a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, I did find that the kind of message towards the end, it worked fairly well for me. Like the fact that he comes to this land and he's just like, I'm a king where I came from. I don't need to do anything by your rules. I'm just gonna take over here, and then you'll have to follow my rules. And then, because they all speak a different language, and he then like learns their language by the end, and he, is, comes to understand like I I need help. I can't just do this on my own. And then essentially like realizes that friendship is important, that kind of thing. But um, it did work for me reasonably well. I yeah, the fact that he made a whole prosthetic arm or a crown. I mean, maybe he used other materials and with it, to supplement. But
I also like that he like sold his soul to like the evil dark forces to get all these armor pieces one by one, and then promptly lost immediately again.
yeah,
Yes, it fires this
even
bolt
that
of
was good
energy and it
enough.
just goes like if.
I felt like they were kind of playing also at like an idea of like players coming into a game and being like that's probably a lot of players' mindset, like, oh, I'm just gonna kick ass in this game, and then the game just kicks their ass continually, and you really kind of learn some respect for the game at that point. Um, and I think especially that's pretty uh, poignant considering it's an MMO where you quite often, unless you're starting like on day one release, you're going up against other people who've probably put hundreds of hours into a game, and they know everything, all the secrets, all the strategies, and yeah, I felt like that was a very intentional message they had behind it.
Yeah, yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, that I can see that, and I kind of like that take.
All right, and yet Elstrom lives.
I like that you guys are explaining what's happening behind the scenes, setting these up as well. So this is good.
On to episode 4. This one is titled Zan, and is based on the game Unreal Tournament, which again is, and none of these 4 games I've actually well, I mean, we've played some. I've played some D&D, but very little. But all these 4, I actually haven't played any of these games. But this is a story that follows a robot named Zan, who is essentially a robot slave, and he's working with a mining colony, and there's dozens and dozens of other robots just like him, and he essentially gains sentience by getting hit on the head, I suppose.
Like you do.
Which it doesn't seem to have a question there on yeah, how that would happen, but I mean, we'll just roll with it. But essentially these robots are being abused by their owners, the workers who are using them. And I mean, I think that's very, very common in most everything in life. But and then eventually the robot rises up, and then is thrown into a tournament to kind of fight for his own life, and ends up coming out on top. So uh, it sounds like Justin, were you familiar with this one? I think.
I played the hell out of Unreal Tournament back in
Okay.
the day,
Yeah.
specifically Unreal Tournament 2004, which added like vehicles and a whole bunch of different things to it. Um, which means that based on that, this seems like it should have been the episode that really resonated with me. And it was really cool to see, like they used the same sound clips for like the ultra kill and all that. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
like I heard that, it's just like, oh man, it's 2004 all over again. And I recognize the weapons at a glance. I recognize Zan as a character, and like some of the others that he went up against, and it's just like, oh man, I'm amazed that they picked this because I don't think they've had an Unreal Tournament game since like Unreal Tournament 3, and that was back in 2010 at the most recent, I think. Um, and yet, aside from the nostalgia, I think this was probably my least favorite of the episodes. Um, I didn't really think Unreal Tournament had a story. In all honesty, it was just an excuse to have these, robots and aliens and mercenaries and whatnot just run around with big guns and shoot each other and occasionally hop into a vehicle and shoot each other with that. Um, so a very odd choice, and I guess I appreciate that they tried to build up one of the characters, but I like by the end of this episode, I thought it was like twice as long as it was, because the story is really kind of thin and bare bones and like stuff we've seen before in terms of like robot attains sentience and is abused and seeks vengeance. I mean, uh, all the way back to like Short Circuit, we've seen this sort of thing to some extent. It didn't really offer anything new, and it really seemed to rely on nostalgia from people who had played the games, in my opinion, to um, keep you with it. Um, sure, it was flashy, sure, it was gory, but I don't know. It just by the like the third or fourth match that Zan gets thrown into, I'm just like, how much more is there to this? So yeah, um, this one weirdly was a disappointment for me.
Interesting points. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't love this one either. I never played that particular game, mostly because it's PC back in the day, but I can very easily see how like writing up a plot to emulate any like shooter game and like trying to make a storyline out of it is extremely hard to do because I don't think they did it here. And it's unfortunate as well because like the ending again, like kind of similar to the first one, like the ending in this one piqued my interest a little bit. Like, okay, there's a rebellion. What is that going to look like? I don't know enough about their society fully to know exactly who's being rebelled against at this point. And it also seemed weird that like the robots were winning and rebelling, but then also the people were cheering like they were going to rebel with the robots against
Yeah.
somebody, I don't know who, the upper class, I guess, or like the management of the tournament, I guess, is I was picturing,
Mm.
except they just eviscerated all those people, so also kind of know. So I guess maybe the mining operation in the world is different than the tournament operation in the world, but yes, I know it just like didn't, I mean, and it's harder, I should say, to get behind a character whose like emotional range is like a tiny light strip versus like a bigger, different colored tiny light strip on their visor. Like that's not a lot of emotions to get out of somebody to be like, I sympathize with you, machine.
Fair enough. I did enjoy the episode for the just kind of like the intensity of it, I guess. Like, it's a lot of there's a lot of emotion behind it, and just, you seeing this robot who is just like watching his other robot friends just get like abused and destroyed and things, and essentially gets to the point where he's like pissed off about it and like does something about it. And uh I found the ending to be very kind of like also like emotional in that same sense. Um where he's like, he did it. He managed to essentially overthrow the people who were abusing him, And though I did have the same question of like the crowd's chanting with him, and I'm not certain why or what that means exactly, but um it was very powerful. I felt like it was the way it was presented um was very like yeah, just powerful. And I although I do kind of have to agree that the story was pretty basic, not really anything that's was original there. Um and a bit thin, but overall I did enjoy the episode quite a bit.
Also, I'd like to point out it took until like at the end there's a spot where something's being uploaded to like the mainframe and whatnot, and there's this hacker guy, in his little cubicle like hammering away at keys. He doesn't think to maybe like unplug the
Yeah.
network until it's at like 99%. It's just like seriously, dude. It's just
It's true. He doesn't seem very good at his job.
I did, yeah, that guy like let the robots into the mainframe, and then essentially when the like head game mastress was like, "What happened?" He's like, "I don't know. They got into the mainframe somehow."
Yeah, he did just throw it. Yeah. It's like,
it was
it
like
wasn't me.
Oh,
effectively
me.
a sad trombone sound in the background, just wah wah. uh,
All right. So that covers the four episodes as I mentioned that we're gonna talk about tonight. There are four more available, which I've seen already. Although
Oh.
I'm not gonna spoil anything on those right now. And
Can we at
we
least
have
say what they are? Because I feel
sure.
like maybe the audience might want to know what those other
Yeah.
ones are.
Yeah. So episode 5 is based on the game Warhammer 40K, which is another board game, originally a board game. Though they do have video game adaptations of that now as well.
I imagine that'll
Um,
be a very small episode, or at least quite mini.
yeah, well played.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, and then episode 6 is one that has mixed emotions in our household.
Ooh.
And this one is the one on Pac-Man. So
oh no.
certainly a game. Obviously, Pac-Man has like no story behind it, really, not within the game itself. And so they, what they've crafted here, I won't go into it obviously, but it was pretty interesting just that they came up with a story for it.
In the year
Um,
20XX. Just
After the
uh,
robot uprising.
yeah.
Episode 7 is on a game called Crossfire, which is a
That was
like a
also a board game.
Yeah.
Is it sort of a board game? Okay.
Well, I mean, you'll get caught up in the crossfire from back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. Okay. I do remember there was a board game called Crossfire. I think this is not based on that game, though. Just to be clear, because this is a very militaristic, like mercenary group versus mercenary group
This
episode
is
here.
how the game makers pictured that game in their head.
Yeah. They were limited by the technology of the 80s, Brett.
Oh, I get it now. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And then episode 8 on this first batch is on the game Armored Core, which is a essentially about like mechs, like mech battles type game. So,
From Software's Forgotten series, or
Mm.
mostly Forgotten. There was like one that came out last year, but
um, so yeah, that's what's coming up. And I guess, well, no, I'll answer that question after. So first, I want to ask, and it sounds like Cody's going to definitely have an opinion on this, but do you need to be familiar with these games to enjoy and or understand these episodes? And is that a problem going forward? To me personally, but again, I was like passingly familiar with all of these thus far, so I kind of knew what was going on, and I do feel like I was able to enjoy them more because of that, though I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to.
for me, I guess we'll see when I get to the Crossfire episode, because I know almost nothing about that game. But I knew fairly little about Sifu, and I enjoyed that episode. I knew almost nothing about New World, and that one was a lot of fun. I'm sure, and yet by conversely, the one I knew the most about is the one I enjoyed the least with Unreal Tournament.
Mhm.
So I would say familiarity probably isn't necessary. You might get a bit more out of it with some of the episodes, but it might not help you with others. So I would say, based on my experience so far, yeah, you can probably go into this, you know, fairly blind, as long as you have at least some interest in video games as like a medium and an art form. You'll probably find something to like here so far. Whether that continues for the rest of the show, well, I guess I'll have to see. But um, yeah, initial impressions, you probably don't need to be too familiar with this stuff.
I'm intrigued to see some of the ones coming up, even in just this first half of the season, because I think some of the higher rated episodes are in the second half that we didn't cover in this podcast, and I haven't seen those yet. But to me, like your question, Brett, harkens to a larger question I have, which is like, who is this show for? Who is this show intended to be enjoyed by? Because I don't know many of these games. I would consider myself a gamer, I guess, pretty infrequently, but I do like to game whenever I can. But I don't know any of these particular titles, mostly because I'm a Nintendo dude. But there's a few on here that I've played or at least have a little idea what they're about. But many of these I don't know at all. And a lot of the ones we've seen so far, like the world building, isn't really crammed in that 15, 20 minutes of the show to like tell me what's going on and why these things are important within the context of the world. I mean, the fact that my favorite one of these four was the one where it was just like this buffoon of a king who is just doing these wacky things on this island. Uh, I don't know if that's what the creators would have wanted to be my favorite episode of the four. Like they might have been like, oh, well, he picked the low-hanging fruit of what we tried for artistically. But like that's the easiest and most accessible for me to get into. But the problem for me with this, I guess, is number one, if you're not like maybe you're going for the hardcore gamer, which seems like a pretty small audience that you'd be catering this much money of animation and stuff into, even with these short episodes. But my bigger crime here is that I feel like if they had expanded any of those four episodes into like a 45, 60-minute cartoon, I would have been all about those and like really sunk my teeth into what was happening and like got into that world and kind of went through the struggles with the characters and understood the world a little bit more. But I don't think we're going to get that the rest of this series, obviously, because it's these tiny, tiny snippets. But I feel like any of these first four had the potential to be something that I would have really enjoyed if it had been longer and more expanded.
Hmm. I think it may come down a lot to just writing that, because like Justin was saying, like some of these he was able to enjoy and understand without knowing the game, and other ones like Cody, you're saying that it didn't hit for you. So maybe it'll just come down to writing for that specific episode, that as to whether it works or not. Um,
I think it could be, but even like just, I guess it is writing, but like even like that first episode we already talked about a few times, but like just give me that last fight and like let me know if the heroes like I'm not going to revisit that moment. Like that's the part that annoys me. Like why not give that to me?
right. They're not going to come back and have another episode to finish that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ending as far as D&D goes for this series, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Coming up here, as I said, we do have another 7 episodes left in this season. And those games include The Outer Worlds, which is one I have played, Mega Man, which I think is going to be interesting, and one I've obviously played, um, Exodus, which I am not familiar with that. I don't know if it, 'cause I know there's a game called Exodus that has like a subtitle. I think maybe it's that, but I don't actually know what that one is. They have Spelunky, uh,
Oh.
Concord, which is a game that released about 2 months ago and is already dead. Like it's already been pulled off their servers. Like you cannot play it anymore, and people have been given refunds.
Love that.
So that's gonna be a little interesting when we get to that episode. Um,
Now watch, that'll be like the most entertaining episode
Yeah.
of all of these.
Like,
yeah,
oh
I think
man, I
it'll,
wish we could explore this world some more.
yep, exactly. We have Honor of Kings, which I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to research what that game is because I don't think I've played that one. And then the last one is apparently a game called Playtime, which I don't know that one either. So I am pretty intrigued for these next episodes coming up. But what do you guys think? Like what's I Cody, you said like Mega Man you're looking forward to, but
Yeah, well, first I'm excited to see if they have Mega Man with a arm cannon or holding a gun, like the cover of the original game. So I'm intrigued to see that first. But
ah,
no, I'm intrigued. Like I said, I think some of the higher critically rated ones here in season one are yet to come. Mega Man, definitely excited for. Pac-Man, I'm intrigued by just based on what you kind of said already about that one. And I don't know what the Outer Worlds is, but I've seen the cover to that game like 4,000 times. So
I've I've heard I have yet to play the Outer Worlds, but I've heard great things about it. So I'm kind of curious about that one. You mentioned Exodus. I don't think that's actually out yet, which also makes it an interesting
oh,
choice for an episode. And yeah, Mega Man definitely hoping that they do that right because I remember the cartoon from like the 90s and
oh yeah, good stuff.
ooh, very, very, very mixed bag on that cartoon. Um, and who knows, maybe the Concord episode will give that thing new life as maybe a movie or a series if they actually manage to make it interesting.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I doubt it, but you never know till you see.
What are you excited for, Brett?
I probably am most excited for the Outer Worlds episode, primarily because I played that game and did really enjoy it. And I think there is room there for like a really fun, cool story. Something that could feel very much like Guardians of the Galaxy and
Okay.
just kind of wacky sci-fi space adventure. I don't know what, obviously I haven't seen it, so I don't know what direction they're gonna go with it, but I do feel like that could be really good. And yeah, just for the nostalgia, I'm very curious what this Mega Man episode is going to be like. So
I hope it's like 20 minutes of them at the stage select screen, not you know which boss to pick.
Mega.
Oh, well, I had a question too. So you kind of alluded to this at the beginning a little bit, Brett, but like maybe another issue. I don't really get what this show is supposed to be, right? And by that, I also mean like, in addition to what I've said already, the like marketing for this show is you kind of hinted at like we're getting some stories maybe like that weren't included in like the video games. This is like some scenes we wouldn't have seen if we played through the game, etc. I was reading about just a little bit ago here about how like the Schwarzenegger King was essentially like an NPC in the game that he's in, and like this is maybe like a backstory, but like it's also not consistent with like what they're presenting to us, which also maybe is a slight annoyance to me. Like the concept of the term secret level indicates like we're kind of finding this bonus stage that's like something from a video game that you wouldn't normally find if you ran through the game kind of quickly. And maybe like one or no, maybe not even these. I mean, basically the one with Schwarzenegger might be the only one that's like a side story that could have feasibly not been in the game he was in. But like Unreal Tournament was just the tournament, and then like Sifu was like a stage out of the game Sifu.
directly from the game, yeah.
Yeah, and Dungeons and Dragons, who the hell knows? Because they can make up a million and one quests for that game, period.
Right.
But maybe like if it even had more like of a consistent concept to like me as a non-gamer for a lot of these games to be like these are things that like took place to fill in gaps of like the story that you would have played in the game. And this is like a secret level that you're seeing, like something bonus. But that doesn't even seem to be like consistent from episode to episode. Like they just came up with a clever name, I think, for the anthology series, which is fine, but I don't know, it's
Mhm.
just a weird name then maybe for the episodes, the show, if that's not what they're going for. I don't know. Thinking out loud
Um,
here.
so I've been watching this with my wife, and it was a matter of I told her we're going to be covering the first few episodes of this for a podcast, so I've got to sit through it. Do you want to watch it with me? So she asked what it was about, and I
Listen
told
how
her.
he handles his research. So I've got to sit through it. Oh my goodness.
It just because if she had said no, I would have watched it on my own time.
Yeah.
But she's like, all right, sure. I'll watch a couple hours of ads, and just thinking it's like marketing for these games. And initially, I was thinking, oh, maybe that's what it is because, I mean, Exodus isn't out yet. I'm sure Amazon would love to have more players in New World. If Concord hadn't died, I'm sure Sony would have been thrilled to gain a few more players for that through this thing. But then you got things like Unreal Tournament, which again hasn't had a new entry in like over a decade. You've got Sifu, which has been out for a couple of years, and I don't think there's like a sequel planned on the horizon or anything. There's just some odd choices here, so I don't think you can even pin this as like entertainment or advertisement as entertainment, even because some of these games are either dead or so old that they're not going to be revived by a 15-minute episode on Amazon. Um, I don't entirely know who this is for. Because your hardcore gamer usually focuses on like a certain genre most of the time, like first person shooters or RPGs or something like that. And they're doing some really deep cuts with some of these. Like Sifu is not a mainstream game, and it seems to kind of straddle genre lines. So doesn't really fall into like a Souls-like game or an RPG or anything like that. And it's kind of its own thing. So the audience for that has to be fairly niche. And then I don't know. It does seem like Cody said, like this is sort of all over the place in terms of trying to cast a really wide net, but where are they throwing that net? Like what body of water are they throwing it into and hoping to catch things? Um, so I don't know. For what it's worth, my wife did enjoy some of these episodes quite a bit. It seemed like, especially like the D&D one. Um, but is this something that, say, she would have just sat down and watched on her own if I hadn't said, "Hey, do you want to watch this with me?" I don't know. Probably not. Um, so yeah, if it's trying to draw in a new audience, I don't know if it's being effective in that. And if it's targeting hardcore gamers, sure, you'll find something to like here, but it's just you're going to be hit with a bunch of stuff you're probably not familiar with too. It's a strange beast, this show.
I'm just thinking too, like if you saw this on Amazon scrolling through, like, would you even immediately think that it's a TV show? Like it's just kind of nebulous. It's like, what is this thing? Like, I wonder how many people didn't even stop it and watch this on Amazon just because they didn't know what it was.
Yeah, or they click on it and they're like, "Oh, 10 minutes long." Will that make people more likely to sit through it, or are they going to say, "I'm not"? I mean, what am I going to get out of 10 minutes of this random stuff? Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll change the topic here, but Brett, it does say, at least on Wikipedia, that there is an upcoming Pac-Man game that continues the story of the episode. So whatever
Oh
that is,
no.
I
intrigued.
did see that myself as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Apparently that one is, yeah, like I say, it's not based on anything that we've seen from Pac-Man thus far,
Okay.
but it's actually they have an upcoming game that apparently this is a prequel to that, as far as I'm aware. So that'll be pretty interesting.
Just thinking back to like the dark and gritty Bomberman reboot they tried to do back in like the Xbox 360 days. And that's what I'm worried the Pac-Man episode is going to be like.
Interesting.
As far as your question, I do feel like it's a really interesting question to ask, and I mean I don't know. I guess I don't know how I would classify myself, but I do feel like this in part is kind of made for a gamer like me, where I kind of feel like even if I'm playing something that is just like an action shooter or something that like doesn't have any like real story or lore behind it, I kind of feel like when I'm playing a game that I'm kind of like telling a story with my gameplay. So like I'm input, like I'm creating my own story as I'm going along. And I feel like these episodes are kind of like that. It's like, you're playing a game, again, just using a shooter game as an example, you know, you're just going around shooting people and trying to get to an end of level, but like there's stories to be told, like why this is happening, and like, you know, adding details into like a confrontation that happens. And um so for me, I just from that standpoint, I really enjoyed like the concept of telling stories within games that where those stories aren't currently being seen. Um because I enjoy, you know, like RPG games with a lot of story elements are like my number one genre. And like I kind of I kind of spread that thinking into other genres as well. Like everything has a story as far as I'm concerned, you know, um whether it's being told to me or not. So um you know, maybe it's somewhere that doesn't seem like a large net to cast, um but for me, so far these 4 episodes have all been really enjoyable. I've really liked what I've seen so far. Though apparently not everyone agrees with me, not even not on this podcast here in particular, but ratings for this seem to be all over the place. And like Cody and I were talking about this before we started recording here, and so um, just a set of numbers here I found. So it currently has a perfect 5-star rating, or at least 4 point very high something, because it doesn't give me that numerical number there on, but 5 stars on Prime. It has a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes with critics, and an 80 something. I didn't have it in front of me here again, but 80 something, like 80% with viewers. IMDb is at 8 of 10. Metacritic 53%. So it wasn't one. Cody, you mentioned one earlier that was like 5 out of
I
10.
think Google was like
Or
a 4.6 out of 5.
yeah, or it
And
was
then
IGN, I think
IGN's
said.
5 out of 10, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So numbers all over the place for this, which seems very interesting. I mean, obviously we'll come back around and give our own ratings at the full season close episode. But any, I mean, I don't think I have any ideas why the numbers are so varying at this moment. But do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Unless there's some really, really passionate like New World fans out there who felt like the game was being mocked or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. There's no accounting for tastes. Like what you like what you like, and if something doesn't jive with you, yeah, you're not gonna be as kind towards it. So I don't know. I think it's just people's individual tastes kind of coming through, or some of it I'm sure is people just trying to be contrary on the internet. So, shock. But
I think there might be some reasons for that. Just speculating here, but just what we have is like a 10 to 20 minute TV show, and that's all we get of a video games world. So it's like if you know the game, that probably influences your rating. If you don't know the game, conversely, if you enjoy short form storytelling, then that's one thing. Like I said, I probably would like these quite a bit if they were an hour each on each of these games. Um, but other people probably maybe we're okay with that. I don't know. I was also just thinking too, like it's another weird thing that video games, other than like I guess in modern consoles where you have hyper realistic graphics, like the way video games look is essentially about the same level as where our animation is for like movies and TVs these days. And that's really interesting to me because I never thought about the fact that like my wife, for example, still to today is coming around finally, but does not like, for the most part, animated things. Like she doesn't want to watch an animated show or movie, but like she would be fine playing a video game, which is essentially the same art, which I never really thought about before. So I wonder if there could be some people out there like that also. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I just wish these had been like I said, like about 45 minutes or an hour where I could have got into the world more and really enjoyed like the characters more in the story of what the main arc of the game premise was for, because I also feel like that might have motivated me to go out and like seek some of these games and actually like be like, this is a cool world. Like I want to find out more about this. So I'm gonna go find a game from this series and play it. And I don't know that I'm getting like I don't know if the 15-minute episode of Sifu is making me like run out and buy Sifu, but maybe if I had had more of that, maybe I would have been more intrigued to do that. I don't know.
I was
Hmm.
actually going to broach that question, so I'm glad you brought it up. Like based on what you've seen of the episodes we've seen so far, I was going to ask if it generated any interest in those games for either of you, but Cody's kind of already touched on that.
That's a good question.
Yeah, what about you, Brett? Do you think are you showing more or less interest in any of these so far, or
Um, I th- well, let's see. I probably would. If we're just limiting it to these four here for the moment. D&D, I've always been pretty interested in that, though I never had the uh basically I just don't have enough people around me who I could because that you can't just play that solo really. So um but like and Sifu has been around. I was aware of it. This episode didn't give me anything new. So I don't think that makes me want to play that anymore. I not necessarily like MMOs aren't necessarily something that I'm into. So, and I was already kind of aware of New World. I don't think this episode did anything for me there. And as you said, Unreal Tournament is basically a dead series. So I probably mean the concept of the like these the tournament is something I think I would enjoy playing, but I don't know that I would go back and play something that's that old to try and get it to run on my PC or whatever, to try and play it when I've already got modern games who that do similar things for me, you know. So
fair?
I would say
Um,
for at least for these four, I don't think that it's making me want to play them anymore than I already do.
gotcha. Um, For me, I'm a little more interested in seafood, mainly because I remembered that it was a thing after watching this. But I have so many games in my backlog. I'm not really like rushing over to the Steam page to like add it to my cart or anything.
Yeah.
Um, I'm always up for like tabletop RPGs, and there have been some good video game adaptations of D&D. Um, so I'm sure at some point I'll check some more of those out and actually finish Baldur's Gate 3. But like, yeah, like you said about Unreal Tournament, I have very fond memories of it. But if there's even servers that still exist, I guarantee they're ghost towns at this point. And I don't have the time
Because
for
of the
MMOs.
rebellion, it's done.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's yeah, the robots won.
That's
And
commentary. Maybe that was their commentary episode on like nobody plays this anymore. Here's why.
uh, and like MMOs, I don't really have the time for those anymore. So yeah, New World is not something I'm going to seek out and look to play either. So,
Hmm.
um, I
I
mean,
know one new world I'll be checking out. There it is.
nice. We'll see how the rest of this goes. I mean, I've always been kind of passingly interested in Warhammer, um, but never really got into it. So maybe this will prompt me to like delve more into that when I get to that episode. The others, we'll have to wait and see. But I do find they're interesting stories for the most part, at least. So, I mean, from a marketing standpoint, meh. But just from an entertainment standpoint, you could do worse, I think, so far anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like what we've seen so far has been very, uh, it definitely visually impressive across the board. Like I don't think there's any doubt there whether or not, like that's up to snuff. But and the stories I think generally for me have been very good as well. Like I feel like they're picking stories that kind of resonate with me in some way. Um, so yeah, I hope that continues on through the rest of the season. We'll see. As Cody said, it sounds like I don't know. I guess like some of the reviewers or critics must have gotten the entire season already, I guess. Um and
Nice.
whether or not the current ratings are reflecting the full season with all episodes, or if that's just the 8 that we have so far, I don't know. So
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Yeah.
See where that falls out. Any further thoughts here on these 4 episodes?
I think we covered all the bases
Yeah, I think so.
pretty well for what we decided to focus on so far.
All right. Well, then I think that wraps us up for this episode. Um, yeah, I was going. Well, no, I'll save it for some other time. I was going to ask you maybe like what games you would want to see adapted in the show, but
I was actually thinking of that same thing. So maybe when we do the full series retrospective,
we can save it for that.
Yeah.
Once we get all these episodes done here, so. But I am Brett, and tonight again we've had Cody and Justin here with us, and we've got do we know where are we doing? Are we doing Blatch next week?
I think maybe that was the plan.
I think,
yeah.
We got a range of new ones coming out here. A couple video games, several video games, and I forget, another tabletop RPG. I think somewhere along the way there
in the new year. Yeah,
January
Star
we get
Wars
all of
coming
our
up here soon.
Star Wars too. Yeah, we got a busy slate again.
Yeah. So, and of course, be on the lookout for our end of the year awards show. The Fondy's coming up very soon here. So.
Oh yeah.
But yes, this is Brett signing off, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Yep.